And whiskey drinkers in particular are kind of flummoxed by the idea of how to choose a particular whiskey for a cocktail. And it's super simple. There's really only one rule. You just use your nose.
Without any further ado, Heather Wibbels, the cocktail Contessa.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Has anyone had a great cocktail yet today? Yes. This one, hopefully the one you have in your hands. If anyone needs an extra cocktail, we've got some more back here. So my name is Heather Wibbels. I am the managing director of Bourbon Women, which is a national organization with chapters across the country. Last year we did between 75 or 80 events over the course of the entire year, and we have a lot of fun educating and celebrating bourbon culture. But what I'm here to talk about today is how to pick the perfect bourbon for your cocktail. Has anyone had problems with that? Yes? It can really be any kind of choice with specific things. So one of the key things that you can do, if you're a whiskey drinker, what's the very first thing you do as you bring whiskey to your face? You smell it, right? So whiskey drinkers are primed to evaluate and drink cocktails. They are primed because what you all do is exactly what someone who judges cocktails do. For everything you bring towards your face, you look at it, you nose it, you taste it, you evaluate the mouthfeel. All of those different pieces are what make whiskey drinkers really, really good at figuring out what they like in cocktails. So I talked to a lot of people about cocktails, and whiskey drinkers in particular are kind of flummoxed by the idea of how to choose a particular whiskey for a cocktail. And it's super simple. There's really only one rule. You just use your nose. You all are going to nose it anyway. You know that when people taste things, when you nose it, about maybe 70 to 80% of your sense of taste comes from your nose, right? If you hold your nose, when you have a sinus infection and you're trying to sip your whiskey, how does your whiskey taste? Does it taste good? It doesn't taste great, right? It tastes muted. You can't really see what's going on with it. You may taste that it tastes like bourbon. You can taste the proof, but you can't really get deep into the flavors of it, right? So what that means is that if you use your nose, you can pick a great bourbon for a cocktail or a whiskey. I'm not bourbon-centric. I love all whiskeys equally. Bourbon, I happen to actually have more bourbon than anything else, but I'm in Kentucky, so that's fair, right? So one of the things that I did for this, you all have a cocktail in your hand, and it is made with the Pursuit Blended Straight Bourbon Whiskey. And what I did to create this cocktail, there are two different ways you can do it. You can either start with your bourbon or you can start with your cocktail. In this case, I knew they wanted us to use one of their products. So I started with the Pursuit United, and I'm like, okay, so what are the flavor notes on this? Some of the flavor notes were, have you all had the Pursuit, this particular one? What are the flavor notes that you all had from it? A little sweet, a little tobacco, maybe some toffee, a little bit of chocolate. To me, there's a little bit of tannic note to it, a little bit of dryness. So what I suggested was we use chai tea to make a chai simple syrup out of extra strong chai tea. We combined it with some orange bitters and some regular Angostura bitters, and then I brought some chocolate bitters in there because I wanted that chocolate flavor to come through on the finish as you drink it. So let me explain to you what I mean by use my nose. If I know I'm going to be using a very particular set of bitters or a very particular cocktail ingredient, I will literally walk around my house with a mixing glass full of all of the ingredients except for the bourbon, and I will hold them up like this with the top off. And if you hold, and I am dead serious that this works, and I will prove it to you. So what I want you all to do, I'm going to pass around this bottle and a bottle of bitters. I want you to bring both of them up to your nose at the same time, and you'll see what I mean by if it smells good together, it'll taste good together because all of these ingredients are actually in there. So you want to take that. There's that. Here's the bottle. And it's going to look really funny because you're putting them up to your nose at the same time. But what that does, see? So the whole idea is that you're going to use your nose to inform your sense of taste. All right, what do you think? See what I mean? Okay. So if you know what cocktail you're going to be making, for example, here's a good example. Tomorrow I'm teaching a class called Make It Pop over in the Brandiamo suite. The very first cocktail we're going to do is a peach and lavender whiskey sour. And because peach itself has a lot of floral notes to it when you get a really lovely peach syrup, I wanted to go for a bourbon that had those same floral notes. So we're going with a Milam and Green bottle that has a lot of those same floral notes to it because I wanted those floral notes to pop a little bit. So as you think about selecting a particular bourbon, think about what you want the cocktail to be and what note you want to pull out. I think they're having fun back there in the back row right now. Don't drink directly from the bottle. You can't drink from the bottle. You can smell it. Don't drink from the bottle. You can smell it though. No. It's not my bottle to give. You know those guys? Okay. So the whole idea behind this is that you're going to use your nose to actually pick specifically what bourbon or what whiskey you want to have. There's two different ways you can do it. You can do it as I did in this case, where I start with the bourbon. So I started with, I knew I was going to use that particular expression. I looked up exactly what the flavor notes were, and I built the cocktail based on those flavor notes. The other way you can do it is you can have all of your cocktail ingredients first. Let's say I'm going to make a Boulevardier or some other cocktail like that. Well, what's one of your all's favorite cocktails to make? Manhattan? So let's say I know I'm going to make a Manhattan, and I'm someone who only has one open bottle of Manhattan at my house. So I know one open bottle of vermouth at my house. So I know exactly which vermouth I'm going to use. So I would literally go to my refrigerator, hold my bottle of vermouth, and start popping the top off of my different bourbon bottles or whiskey bottles, probably rye, honestly. If I'm going to make a really great Manhattan, I'm awful going to use rye, and smell them together. Because 70 to 80% of your sense of taste comes from your nose, if things smell together, they're probably really going to taste good together. So as you all go through your own collection, sometimes the choice of which bourbon to use is what bourbon is almost finished, right? Which bottle do I want to get rid of? I don't know about you, but I have too many bottles at home. I'm once again in the position where I have floor bourbon, so I have bourbon lined up on the floor. Floor bourbon is a real thing in the bourbon world. I see you all smiling. You know what I mean about this. So the floor bourbon that I have at my house, I eventually wear that down because that's the bourbon I'm going to use most likely for cocktails. When you all think about starting with your ingredients, so if I'm going to make a Boulevardier, which is, and thank you for putting that back up there. If I'm going to make a Boulevardier, which is Campari, which is a bitter Italian liqueur with a lot of citrus notes, it's got some sweet vermouth in it. If I'm going to choose a really great whiskey to go with it, generally a Boulevardier has bourbon in it. So what I would do is take my mixing glass, I'd put my sweet vermouth and my Campari in it, and I will literally walk around the house smelling everything, one right up to my nose, to see what actually tastes best together, or what smells best together. Now, a couple of other tips as you all choose things at home. I'm going to advocate, really great chefs, they taste while they're cooking, right? So they'll get a little spoon or they'll get a little knife and they'll take a little bite to make sure that things taste the way that they want them to. You can do the same thing when you build a cocktail. Take a straw, take your bar spoon, have a tiny little sip, and that will help you know whether or not you're on the right track. The other tip I will give you is that if you are actually developing a cocktail, if you're developing something from scratch and you know it's a variation on a particular cocktail, take the time to write down what you're doing, because once you start drinking, you will never remember that ratio again. I have lost some of the best cocktails in the history of humanity because I did not write down while I was actually doing the cocktail development. So those are just a couple of very small tips on how to pair a particular bourbon with a cocktail. But I will give you the caveat for all of these things that your palate is your own. And a classic cocktail recipe is called a classic cocktail recipe because a lot of people like it that way. But there are no rules really in cocktails except to make sure it tastes good for you. So just like in whiskey, when we say your palate is your own, for cocktails, your palate is your own. Don't let someone else tell you that this is the best Manhattan they've ever made and you're absolutely going to like it. If you don't like it, that's fine. But if you can evaluate what's not right with it, is it too sweet? Is it too dry? Do you not like the bitters? Do you not like the bourbon? Those are all things you can use to really craft the next changes that you make in the next iteration of the cocktail. So those are kind of just basics on how to choose a bourbon for your cocktail. Do you all have particular questions for me that I can answer about cocktail creation and picking a great bourbon for a cocktail? It's a really great question. He asked, when I start to make a cocktail, do I start with what the bourbon is first, or do I start with what the extra ingredients are? And the answer is, of course, it depends. If I know I really want a Manhattan, but I don't really care what base spirit I want, I will go ahead and get the ingredients out for the Manhattan, and then I'll choose my bourbon. But if I am damn well just decided I'm having a Boulevardier, I don't care what goes on tonight, I'm having it, that's what I'm going to do, I can know that I'm going to start with that, pick my bourbon. And conversely, if I know I really want to use Pursuit, I just got a bottle of Pursuit, I want to use that in a cocktail tonight, what I will do is take my sample, I will nose it just like I would any time I evaluate a whiskey. And that's the fun part, right? Smelling it and nosing it. What'd you say? Oh, sorry. I'm hearing the people talk behind me, too. But what you really can do is start with what this cocktail reminds you of. And even now when I'm nosing it, it makes me want an old-fashioned. It makes me want those tannic notes to be bolstered a little bit. So for this particular cocktail, for what this is, it's a chai old-fashioned. I don't know if you all were here when we were talking about it. But we took chai tea, brewed it extra strong. I did a 1-to-1 simple syrup with demerara sugar and the chai tea. And that's going to add a lot of those baking spices from chai tea, but it's also going to add some tannicness and some dryness, which fits in really nicely with the way they're using the barrels for Pursuit's blends. So I started, in this case, with the bourbon, right? But maybe I just want a chai old-fashioned. I could have ended up with this bottle. I could have ended up with another bourbon. So that's really how you start thinking about choosing a particular cocktail or a particular bourbon for a cocktail. And for me personally, with all of this cocktail work, you can go to cocktailcontessa.com and find a lot of this information out there, right? But you can also go to bourbonwomen.org because we have a lot of cocktail information on that. And we actually happen to do a lot of cocktail education for our members as well. So what other questions do you all have for me? So she's asking how I come up with ideas for cocktails. And there are a couple different ways I do. A lot of times I'll come up with an idea where I have a base cocktail and I'll start to tweak some of the ingredients. The easiest way when you're first starting to play with cocktails, the easiest thing to do is change 1 or 2 ingredients, either with an infusion or change out, instead of using Angostura bitters for an old-fashioned, maybe I want to make this, but I want to use cardamom bitters, right? Maybe I want to use clove bitters or maybe pecan bitters. So you can take a base cocktail. Do you like cardamom? Is that why you're, okay, yeah. So cardamom can be a very polarizing element, right? It's a polarizing flavor. It's very floral. For some people, it's sort of like cilantro. Some people don't like it, right? But if you love cardamom, you know exactly what I mean. So really you can do either one. But often what I'll do is I'll have an idea that I want to make a cocktail that tastes like a derby pie, which is bourbon, chocolate, and pecans. That's how my family makes it anyway. And so I'll know that I want a cocktail that has bourbon in it. I'm going to have a chocolate element. It could be the bitters, it could be a liqueur. I would want a nut element as well for the pecans. So you can really build exactly what you want based on your favorite food or based on a pairing that you want to make happen in the cocktail itself. So that's a great question. When do you know when you should stop adding in mixers? Probably right before you put in that last little bit, right? There's a way of thinking about cocktails where you can think about it being good enough. Is it good enough? Yes. Then you finish that one, you've got your base recipe. Maybe you make one more with a tiny tweak, but you know you've got one that you actually enjoy. It is very hard, and it's also like knowing exactly when you're going to finish a piece of art, right? When do you know a painting is finished? When you put one extra brush stroke on it, right? So it's the same thing with cocktails. You want to make it good, you want to make it complex, you want to make it balanced. If you have a complex, balanced cocktail, just like a complex, balanced bourbon or whiskey, you have made a masterpiece, really. So that's how I think about it.